What's up YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another Blu-ray Spotlight video. And I had gotten this from the nice friends at Scream Factory. And I've been looking forward to checking this out because it's a film that I've only experienced in certain conditions. Usually low quality prints and or prints that were being used to make fun of the film. And if you haven't guessed already, it is The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And it is a 1962 film from Joseph Green and was shot pretty quickly, over a short amount of time, and that certainly shows in the end product. But it's a film with Herb Evers starring as Dr. Bill Cortner, this very arrogant, young, hotshot physician and surgeon, and he's following in the footsteps of his father, who looks down upon his recklessness, etc. And one of the commentarians on this release, mentions that the film is really just a subtext about his hatred for his father and repressed homosexuality, etc. But essentially, what happens quickly after this initial, groundbreaking surgery scene is that Dr. Bill takes his girlfriend Jan, played by Virginia Leith, later known as Jan in the Pan, takes her on a trip back to his getaway house/laboratory, and has one of the silliest car crashes ever. He just randomly decides to start driving like a maniac on back roads, and then just throws his hands up in the air. So high quality car crash scene where you just go, and then it cuts to him just rolling on the grass. Love that stuff. But in the ensuing car wreck, he discovers that Jan has been damaged except for her head. So he decides, well, it's a great idea if I take her back to my lab, hook her up into this kind of basting pan, and then pump this magical fluid that he's concocted in there to keep her alive. So she's really the brain that wouldn't die. And this brain in a jar juices up the cover art mightily, but it's not actually in the film. She's the brain that wouldn't die, and I do love this artwork here. So Bill, of course, decides, well, my girlfriend's pretty cool, so I better go find her a body at least, so I can Frankenstein her back together. And meanwhile, he's been pulling these kind of experiments before, and there's a failed prior experiment that he's locked up in a closet in the same room, and he's got a laboratory assistant, and he's pretty much stuck talking to Jan throughout most of this film, while Dr. Bill runs out around town stalking the ladies. And then there's this extremely sleazy midsection where he's checking out strip joints and trying to follow ladies down the street, and there's even a beauty contest at one point. So yeah, that stuff's pretty interesting as he eventually tries to find the new replacement body, and I think more he's more interested on performing the experiment than bringing his girlfriend back in fully ambulated form. I don't think he really cares that much about her or anybody else. So, but yeah, The Brain That Wouldn't Die is not exactly executed with the most skill. There's some lighting that's dodgy with 300 shadows going in every direction possible. There's a notorious death scene where a character just bleeds endlessly, walks up a stairwell, enters a different room, wanders around the room, then goes back down into the room he left for no reason at all. Great stuff. But The Brain That Wouldn't Die is still pretty fun. And if you've seen Mystery Science Theater 3000 on television, the very first episode in which Michael J. Nelson took over from Joel Hodgson, or Joel Robinson, the first film that the mad scientist tormented him with was The Brain That Wouldn't Die. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I've seen this film at local theaters during those Halloween kind of 2-for-1 nights where you can go and plunk down $4 and see films, but they're always taken from public domain prints. So it was a trip seeing this thing in high def. So yeah, the Blu-ray has some really, really cool artwork. I just love the look, the kind of really overt, stylized splash of that with the big red banner on the bottom. And the inside has the cool photo of Jan in the Pan. So no wraparound artwork or anything like that. It is in 1080p, and it's presented in its original 1.66 to 1. And for a film that was shot, quickly over a weekend, essentially, or a week or so, it actually looks pretty nice on Blu-ray. It's really impressive. It's that case where you've seen a film and so many public domain prints and low-res prints and on television, etc., that you forget that there's a potential that when this was made, it might have actually looked relatively decent. And there's some nice contrast to it, way more like rich and detailed than I expected it to be. The fine detail is really impressive when Dr. Bill is driving around like a madman. His suits are usually either herringbone patterned or something that where you can see like the high quality amount of detail. Where it finally falls down is where there's definitely some print damage. There's a lot of interesting print damage where it looks like there's little like globules or circular stains on the image, and those show up every once in a while. And grain is extremely lively. I don't know what this thing was shot on, if it was like 16 millimeter or 35, but definitely very grainy, very lively. But yeah, I mean, the shots of Jan in the Pan are pretty striking, and they're bold and vibrant. The contrast, for black and white film is just full of pop and jumps right out at you. So it's amazing how good this thing looks. I never would have expected to have a kind of archival quality version of The Brain That Wouldn't Die. So, yeah, they brought it on video. The audio is just DTS HD Master Audio Mono. But that said, it's got a rich body to it. It doesn't sound very shrill, and especially surprising considering that most of the musical scores in the film are just, public domain library pieces that have been used. And obviously Joseph Greedon couldn't afford a full orchestra and a composer to put something together. So it sounds good. Dialogue sounds fine, etc. So no surround sound trickery or anything like that. But for an old mono early 60s film, not bad at all. There are a decent amount of special features on the sucker, including the film itself. It's uncut. There's a little bit more blood and gore, and there's also a pretty cool, tonally interesting opening in which you hear Jan in the Pan, saying that she wants to die and all that stuff. And it's cool, and it's just set against black, and you see the opening Brain That Wouldn't Die title screen. And I thought that was pretty effective, actually, and set a kind of creepy tone right off the bat. There's also an alternate scene from the international cut where Dr. Bill goes to seek out a woman who is a model, and she's doing kind of cheesecake shots for a bunch of local photographers who the commentarians, point out that they're all like shooting from behind her, so they don't even get to see her face. But there's a scene where she's nude in an alternate version, so that's included on here. And the audio commentary that I've been mentioning is on here with film historian and author Steve Haberman and Tony Sasso. The commentary track is a mixed bag. It is actually very informative, and it's very light and fun. But on the flip side, it's almost a little too snarky at times. You kind of don't get a sense for. I mean, they do talk about the film is bad, etc., and you don't really get an ultimate sense as to how much they like the film and how much they think it's a piece of crap, essentially. And one of the commentarians says that he's writing a book about, or has a book out about the subject. I tried to find it, and I can find no such book. So there's almost times where I think they're taking the piss. I mean, there's one bit where they talk about another actor that has a very short bit in the film, and all the other films that he's been in, and I'm thinking, well, I haven't heard about any of these or this actor. It's probably true, but I'm like, this could almost be an April Fool's joke, and they're just like ranting out, Tony Jorgensen Sr. was in the film Love on the Antarctic Flow, and that kind of thing. And it actually turned out to be true, but at the time I'm like, I don't even know if they're really telling me anything that's legitimate or if they're just messing with me. So there's a lot of that, and so they do talk trash about the film. They do think it's really not well made, etc. But they seem to have some sort of level of appreciation and affection for it. And when it gets to the super sleazy portion of the film, they start to kind of warm up to it a little bit and say, well, yeah, actually, this is a little bit effective, and this is shot well, etc. So it's got a lot of like kind of sarcastic tone to it. But that said, you do find out a ton of information about all of the small character actors in this film and what else they've done, etc. So it is a fount of information. So if you can get over the kind of snarky tone of it all, you'll be fine. And there is a still gallery and the best special feature of all. Since this is coming from Scream Factory, And Shout Factory has put out a ton of Mystery Science Theater 3000 releases. You get the MST3K full version of the episode with the brain that wouldn't die. It's in standard definition, but it doesn't have any of the weird kind of motion artifacts that I found on the Mad Max release and the television cut of Army of Darkness. Looked great for standard definition TV, and I had a blast with that sucker. It was cool, revisiting the first moment when Michael J. Nelson stepped aboard the Satellite of Love and was force-fed the brain that wouldn't die. Really cool, and a really, really fun extra to throw on there. So I don't know if there are any quote-unquote fans of this film per se, but if you are a fan of, what they call psychotronic cinema, early 60s exploitation and sleaze and, monster pictures, so yeah, this is a really, really cool release. So I enjoyed the hell out of it. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. We're going to talk about some more Blu-rays and all sorts of crazy stuff coming up here soon. So cheers. Thanks for hanging out.